The origin of Defy the Stars honestly came from that movie Prometheus from a few years ago, you remember? And I was like, what if the movie Prometheus didn't suck? What if it wasn't terrible? What if you actually told a story about a religious person dealing with a robot that has some human capacity and human emotion and is programmed to do certain things? Are they responsible for that or not? How do you regard them? It turned out Ridley Scott didn't want to make that movie, so I was like, fine, I'll tell the story. Noemí, yes. I knew that from the beginning, that she would be a soldier. She's from a colony world, Genesis, that is struggling to get independence from Earth. And because of that, she was drafted at a pretty young age and is already a very experienced pilot. And because of the deadliness of the war, she assumes she is not going to live long, and in fact has volunteered for a likely suicide mission in the near future. But before that can happen, destiny takes a hand. Is that the line from Casablanca? I don't remember. The most exciting part with the Defy the Worlds was probably getting inside Abel's head. Abel is the mech or robot, and in many ways he does not think exactly like a human. In some ways he does, but in some ways he does not. And I thought it would be really hard getting inside of his head, and in fact it wasn't. It was a lot of fun to look at things the way that he would look at them, and there was a lot of humor in it that I hadn't realized there would be. Probably the most challenging part was designing that universe, because it wasn't one world. It was 5 worlds, 5 planets that they visit and that we know about in this, and each one is beginning to have its own culture and its own identity separate from Earth. So figuring out how they would travel easily between these worlds and how different things would be, that was probably the hardest part. It's interesting. I mean, I've been very lucky. At this point, it's 11 years since I sold my first book, and next year will be 10 years since I've got to be a full-time writer, which is wonderful. And I've gotten to travel all over the world and keep writing, which has been terrific. That said, I've never had a hit so big that I knew any further out than another 2 years. I can probably do this another 2 years, and beyond that, we'll see. And, that's still where I am, exactly. Like, I'm pretty sure I've got another couple years. After that, I don't know. We'll see. Here's hoping. To some extent, when you finish a series anyway, you do have to kind of try and put the characters out of your mind, because you have, in my case at least, there's always been a next book. There have always been other characters waiting for their turn, and you don't want to invest in them less and not care about them. Particularly 1,000 Pieces of You, my last series, the Firebird series, I could have gone on with that forever. I kind of know what happens to those people for the rest of their lives. But I have to let that go. Noemí and Abel have their time in the sun now, and there are other characters starting to emerge for what I'm going to work on next. And, it's less about casting away the old as making room for the new. The main thing with science fiction versus magic, because my first books were paranormal, so you had magic basically at work. And magic works however you want it to. You're like, oh, that's what the runes say. That's how it has to be. Oh, that's the spell. With science, I still get to make up the science. I don't write hard sci-fi. These are softer books, but it has to feel like science. It has to have real limits on it. And those limits have to be very absolute. And so doing that and coming up with that, it's actually pretty hard to come up with a scientific device that's futuristic and does all these other things, but at the same time feels like it could be real, and it's limitations that make something feel real. Thank you so much for having me back to Guadalajara. I'm looking forward to seeing even more of you this time, hopefully, and it's a really incredible privilege to get to come here for this.